Pledge of Allegiance. Place your right hand over your heart. Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Madam Chair, colleagues, I know typically our presentations and special introductions are reserved for our Friday meetings, but we had such a special delegation making their way through Los Angeles on their way to the state capitol and the city of Hesperia, California, that I wanted to take advantage of their presence to ask them to come forward at this time. A delegation from the Philippines who are here on a 4-day trip. Why don't you come join me here at the podium? Led by the Honorable Josefina M. de la Cruz, Governor of Bulacan, Philippines. And she's leading on behalf of their national organizations a large delegation that I'll introduce in a second. As I mentioned, they're here in Los Angeles for a brief day, and then they're on their way to the state capitol to meet with some of our state leaders. But they're on their way. Their destination is Hesperia, California, where they will be conducting a sister city agreement with the city of Hesperia and furthering their ties with the city of Hesperia and all of California. So I felt it was very appropriate to present the certificate of welcome to the Honorable Josefina M. de la Cruz. And in a second here, I'll introduce the other members who are here as part of the delegation. Madam Governor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I want to ask you to say a few words in a second. Before I ask her to come say a few words, let me just introduce some of the other VIPs who are part of the delegation. They include the Honorable Eduardo Veloso, Congressman of the Philippines of the 3rd District in Tacloban. Not here. Dominador Tupaz Jr., National Co-op Mart Federation Chairman. Raul Hernandez, Director of the Philippines Chamber of Commerce. Nelson, the Honorable Pacifico Aniag, Board Member of the 1st District of Bulacan. The Honorable Worley Trinidad, Board Member, 2nd District, Bulacan. Honorable Evelyn Paulino, Mayor of Dona Remedios, Trinidad, Bulacan. You want to introduce the rest?
No, that's enough.
Oh, okay, that's enough, she said. I want to thank you all for being here and all your guests and colleagues. I also want to make mention of the fact that a good friend to Los Angeles City Hall and a good friend to the Office of the President, Mr. Jim D'Antona, Sr., has been coordinating this delegation. So thank you for your great work on behalf of the city. And now, Madam Governor, we'd love for you to share a few words.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Mr. President, Alex Padilla, members of this council, friends. In behalf of the delegation from Bulacan, Philippines, we would like to thank you, of course, for welcoming us and allowing us the opportunity to be able to visit this seat of government of Los Angeles. You know, we have had more than 30 years of relationship with the Americans. And in fact, very much of our government has been very much influenced by your government. But more than that today, we are very happy to know that there is a big Filipino population in this city that in fact may be a part of those who have given you the privilege to govern our countrymen. And for that, we feel as well that we can be friends in the way that this country has provided opportunities for our people. We bring opportunities for business, we bring opportunities for investment, and we bring opportunities for friendship. Thank you. From our people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And for the record, I will share these with Councilmember Eric Arcetti, who represents historic Filipino town in the city of Los Angeles. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, we have 9 council members. We need 1 more for a quorum. Would Mr. Cardenas, Mr. Garcetti, Ms. Hahn, Mr. Parks, Mr. Reyes, and Mr. Weiss please come down to the council chambers? Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Cardenas, Garcetti, Gruel, Han, Labange, Ludlow, Miskowski, Parks, Perry, Reyes-Smith, Piragosa, Weinstein, Padilla, 10 members present and a quorum, Madam President.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. First order of business, please.
Approval of the minutes.
Mr. Labange moves and Mr. Reyes seconds.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Mr. Villaraigosa moves and Mr. Smith seconds.
Mr. President, this is a time for comments from the public on items not on council's agenda.
Let's dispense with consent items first, then we'll come back to general public comment.
First items on the agenda are items noticed for public hearings. Items 1 and 2 are protests against street vacations. If there are no protests, council should instruct the city engineer to proceed.
Okay, members, items 1 through 2 now before us, and I do not have requests from members of the council, of the public to address the council. Public hearings are open and closed. Members wishing to call either of these items special? Seeing none, let's open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Okay, so ordered. Next items, please.
Next items 3 through 7 are also public hearing items. They are ordinances on various street lighting districts.
Okay, members 3 through 7 now before us, and again, I do not have speaker cards on these items. Public hearings are open and closed. Members wishing to call any specials 3 through 7, seeing none, let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Those are approved.
Excuse me, Mr. President, the orders will go over for 1 week to February 1st.
Okay, only 10 members are present. Next items.
Item 8 is a finding of public convenience or necessity in Council District 3, and a motion is required to grant the application.
Okay, members, item number 8 now before us, and again, no speaker cards on this item. Public hearing is open and closed. Do we have a motion from Mr. Zine? If not, let's hold this item on the desk. Next item, please.
Next item is item number 9, and the applicant consents to a continuance to February 9th.
Okay, any objection, members, to continuing this item to February 9th? Seeing none, item 9 is continued for those 2 weeks. Next items, please.
Next items are items for which public hearings have been held. Items 10 through 26. Items 10 and 11 are confirmations of city officials. Do you wish to hold those on the desk?
Let's hold items 10 and 11 temporarily on the desk. We'll take those matters up after dispensing with consent items and before public comment.
And then before council would be items 12 through 26. And on item number 26, there are 2 reports on the file. A motion is required.
Okay, members, items 12 through 26 now before us. Public hearings have been held on these items in committee. A motion from the floor would be required to reopen the public hearings. Seeing no such motion, Ms. Gruel?
Item number 16, I believe we do have some cards and would request if there are cards to open that for public hearing called special.
Any objection to reopening the public hearing on item 16? Seeing none, let's call that special. Any other specials on 12 through 26?
Continue item number 21 for 1 week.
Okay, an objection to continuing item 21? Seeing none, that's continued to February 1st. Colleagues, we still need a motion on item 26. There's no motion at this time. Let's hold that on the desk as we await a motion. On the balance of the items, Madam Clerk. Ms. Miskowski.
Committee report on item 26.
Which committee's report?
Commerce and Energy.
Commerce Committee report on item 26. If there's no further discussion on that, that'll be our motion for item 26. Mr. Zine. 22, called special by Mr. Zine. Mr. Zine will also need a motion from you on item number 8. But in the meantime, on the balance of the items, 12 through 26, let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Those are approved. Next items, please.
Items 27 through 36 are items for which public hearings have not been held. 10 votes are required for consideration.
Okay, we do have cards on item number 27. We'll call that special. On 28 through 35, we do not have cards submitted by members of the public. Public hearings are open and closed. Specials, Ms. Gruel.
Yes, Mr. Weiss asked that item number 34 be continued for 1 day.
Okay, members, any objection to continue item 34 to tomorrow? Seeing none, the item is so ordered. Mr. Reyes.
Yes, thank you, Council President. Item 35, please.
35, call special by Mr. Reyes. Any other specials? Seeing none on the balance of the items, Madam Clerk, please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Those are approved. Items 36 through 43, colleagues, are all closed session items. We'll hold those on the desk. Madam Clerk.
Next items are items on the supplemental agenda. Items 44 and 45 are both items for which public hearings have not been held.
And I do not have requests from members of the public to address the council on 44 or 45. Public hearings are open and closed. Members wishing to call either of these items special? Seeing none, let's open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
11 eyes.
Those are approved. And next item, please.
Mr. President, do you wish to take up the commissioners at this time?
Let's take the commissioners at this time, and then we will turn to general public comment for today's meeting. Items 10 and 11, please.
Item number 10 is confirmation of Ms. Jerry Perron to the El Pueblo de Los Angeles Historical Monument Authority.
Okay. And if Ms. Perron is here, if she can come forward at this time. There she is. Colleagues, this item has had a public hearing in committee. We have a committee report recommending confirmation. Members wishing to be heard, beginning with Ms. Perry.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I just wanted to speak on behalf of this nomination. I know Jerry very well and know her work in the Old Bank District and her great respect and expertise in renovating historic buildings and adaptively reusing them. And I think that she brings an enormous amount of skill to El Pueblo, and expect her to help the authority move forward in finishing the murals and making it the scale and grandeur that it so richly deserves. It's a historic treasure for the entire city of Los Angeles.
Thank you.
Mr. Labange.
Thank you. We had this very distinguished individual in our district who lives in the heart of the city, in the 10th district, but as Ms. Perry spoke of, has great expertise and knowledge. And I know you were a little shy in committee, but be a little less shy right now. And just tell them about your vision of the birthplace of Los Angeles and what you could do to help connect the birthplace more to the city of Los Angeles, especially some of those buildings that are not occupied now get occupancies in it.
All right. Well, I hate to speak about my vision before I've really gotten in and delved into anything, but I do think that you can't forget that it's not just an alley, that it is the whole neighborhood, and that there are a lot of the vacant buildings. And I think that if there was any way that we could bring the businesses to the exterior and really make it a neighborhood, that it is a time when we could tie it into the rest of the city with all the development going on.
This is a very important point because she thinks an awful lot before she makes her statement, which is so important on doing that, Jerry. You're going to do a great job. I'm very excited about it. You come from a great company that has done wonderful things and challenges here in downtown Los Angeles. So I'm excited about your appointment and look forward to you contributing, and try to get parking back on Main Street. Try to open up the Main Street side of the Pueblo and try to connect the historic birthplace of the city to all of Los Angeles. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Council President. Welcome.
Thank you.
You know, a few years back, say probably in the mid-'80s, around there's a tendency, a movement to bring in some pretty big corporate commercial type operations onto Rivera Street. You know, the McDonald's, the big corporate entities. And it was thought that it should be commercialized in that way because of the revenue. And there was a big pushback by the families that had been there for decades and people who want to maintain the character of that historic site. As you know, for many folks, this is the one last remnant of that historic fabric that speaks to the communities that were here even before Los Angeles was established as a United States entity. That being said, can you give me your perspective on how would you respond to such pressures, given that for some folks it's an easy fix to bring in monies through those channels? I just want to get your feel on that posture.
I think that if you went that route and brought in the big box retailers, you destroy it, what you were trying to save. I mean, at the Old Bank District, we do all mom and pops, hopefully people that live in the neighborhood. That's what you need, and for that, it is, as you say, it is an historic monument, it is the families, it is the small businesses, and if you're going for the big bucks, you know, go to a mall. Sorry.
I appreciate that, only because it's my first time I get to meet you, and I just want to understand the orientation. And if ever was a place filled with creative tension, that's one of them. So I'm your neighbor right across the street, and anything we can do to support you, please let us know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Other members wishing to be heard? Seeing none, let's open the roll on confirmation, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 eyes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service to the city. Next item, please.
Item 11, and that's confirmation of Ms. Renee Anderson to the Central APC.
Okay, if Ms. Anderson will come forward at this time, and while Ms. Anderson comes forward, Mr. Zine?
Yes, Mr. President, request to reconsider items that are up for ordinance for approval.
And that
All the
would be
ordinances?
Items 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Okay,
Yes.
let's open the roll on reconsideration, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
13 eyes.
Okay, and now that we have 13 members present, let's reopen the roll on all the ordinances, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 eyes.
Those items are now approved. Coming back to item 11, Ms. Anderson, how are you? Mr. Reyes.
Colleagues, I had the pleasure of meeting Ms. Anderson. She came before Plum. We threw some very hard questions at her, but I know she was very nervous. But I just want to thank you for her hard work. I appreciate the fact that the orientation you bring to the commission itself is one in which it reflects all income groups, understanding the plight of the working poor, those who are struggling just to make their rent, and the land use impacts it has on those communities, especially in a day where in the San Fernando Valley, the average median cost of a home is $550,000, I was told, and we're up to $300,000 in the east side. When we talk about communities that where half are living at or below poverty, meaning they are making $17,000 a year for a family of 4, the question becomes, where do people live? So these are very important issues, these are intricate issues, and I'm very glad to have a person like yourself with the background that you bring to the table to start shedding light on some of these tensions and very real experiences people are going through in the quest of trying to keep a roof over their head. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there any pearls of wisdom you'd like to share with us? Any thoughts?
Well, like I said in the committee meeting, that my goal is to make sure we have affordable homes, and I think I can add great access to this commission. Working with the Service Employees International Union Local 347, planning is what we do best, and my boss always have a plan. So I think that once I learn the process and the ordinance, that I'll be able to get in there and really do a great job.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Other members of the council wishing to be heard on this item? Seeing none, let's open the roll on confirmation, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 eyes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank you as well for your service to the city. Let's send both items 10 and 11 forthwith, please. And now is the time for general public comment, an opportunity for members of the public to address the council on matters within our jurisdiction but not appearing on today's agenda. And Madam Clerk, if we can put up a clock, please, for general public comment. Will Michael Carreon please come forward, followed by Luciano Yee, Frank Medina, and Sam Howell.
Well, Councilman, my name is Michael Carrion, and I bring forward to you today the policy on parking enforcement. I feel that it's unfair that parking enforcement agents are citing and towing away vehicles all over the city, but yet we have a tollway zone for a reason, to get the traffic in and out of the city. E-plate vehicles seem to have exemption from parking and causing this congestion that we fight so much to clear up. The smog, the traffic jams, and everything are caused by the abuse of E-plate vehicles. I feel that the people who are on the committee, which are Viragosa, Smith, and Labange, should do something about this. Abuse of an E-plate should not continue. If it does, these people should be cited like everyone else. their vehicles towed away like everyone else, and let the employee driving that vehicle be responsible for the impound fees. Impounding a vehicle is $170 plus $40 to $60 for the citation for the average person who's trying to conduct business in the city. If you go downtown, right outside this building, there are 20 vehicles parked outside in the red and in dangerous spots. On Broadway and Temple, hundreds of vehicles come from all over the place to go to court there. I almost got into an accident yesterday. This is what prompted me to be here today.
Okay, thank you.
It is illegal, and the city should take steps to do something about it. Thank you.
I have Luciano Yee, Frank Medina, Sam Howell, Vanessa Dean, Candido Mares. Y'all here as a group?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. President, council members. Here we are almost a year since the last time, from the first time that the Small Local Business Advisory Committee was put together. Again, it was to look at mega contracts and see how we could possibly bring more dollars to smaller businesses. It's done the opposite. Here is another group of individuals who have been boxed out of the process in the city of Los Angeles. People that have worked hard and who have serviced this city for many, many years, who are now trying to survive, trying to find out why is this taking place. So I would really like you to hear from a few of them, and also from city workers who have been targeted and abused because they were willing to speak out and because they saw something wrong. We need to hear from them.
Good morning, everybody. I came to you about a month ago, December 22nd, I believe, of 2004.
Your name, sir?
Luciano Yee. And I say to you that there was a scaly package waiting for me when I returned to work. And there we are. Here we are. I got the scaly package, and I'm pending right now. I've been humiliated by being escorted out of the yard where I work at. For the past 16 years in the department, I have never threatened anyone. I've been threatened twice last year by a supervisor. He came into the warehouse, he raised his hand, pointed the finger at me, and pulled the trigger. I should have reported this to the police department, but I was afraid of retaliation. I did report this to an ex-manager, and his advice to me was, be careful. This is management. There's nobody, nowhere that you can go to that will believe you on this. Well, I do have one witness. They say if you ignore it, it will go away. This management is cold-blooded. There are some exceptions with this management, but they're very few. But nevertheless, they're cold-blooded. They do not care about safety. They did lie to you on an item that its sale is not allowed here in California. And they will lie to you again because they can get away with it. And because I care, now I'm being retaliated on. That is why I'm going to read to you, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one person to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and natures of God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We need your help. As City Council, we need your help. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Frank Medina. My company is Diana Industries. We're a small business and we're certified by the City of Los Angeles. As a matter of fact, we're currently under contract with the City of Los Angeles. We've been supplying a product to the Department of Water and Power for approximately 7-8 years. We've shown where we were able to save them money, and all of a sudden we were cut off. We couldn't visit the end users. We were told new programs were in place. I heard that there was an email going about circumventing any sales by our company to the Department of Water and Power. We've been a good supplier. We produce our products locally, and we're dumbfounded what happened. Thank you very much.
My name is Sam Howell with Peerless Materials in Los Angeles. We sell woven and non-woven wipers. We have tried over and over numerously to get bids, to be on the bid contracts. We have sold one item here and there, and we have told that we cannot be used because the contract is already with someone else, and we've just been not able to bid. It's wrong, and we'd like to, that's why we're here speaking our mind. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Stan Frost. The company I represent owned is Hygienic Services. And I've been frozen out from the port, the airport, the harbor, and every other city department going. There's a mega contract in place that's totally unfair. I have written to Councilman Cardenas, stated facts, figures. For some reason or other, this mega contract seems to be a blanket over all small business. So you have the port, and they're chasing the port for $500,000 for some public relations work that may or may not be right. Here's a contract for $1.5 million at the port and a $14 million contract for the city. City council's doing nothing. Maybe somebody ought to look into it. I thank you for listening.
Thank you, sir.
Just a point of information, where could we help these people? Because they've come and expressed themselves.
Mr. LaPonte,
Just want to ask you,
Are
Mr.
you
President.
asking me?
No,
I'm asking the President of City Council.
And we've had, these folks have come to the full council before. They've also been on a regular basis to the Commerce Committee, which is where DWP items are considered. And Mr. Cardenas has introduced a motion to this effect, and they have ongoing conversations with staff. It hasn't been completely resolved yet, unfortunately, but I think they are making progress. So that would be the proper venue, and that has not been ignored by that committee.
Do you know that to be, you've been informed of that, correct?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So this is just to put it on the public record.
Thank you, sir.
Just want to make
Thank
sure
you.
that all of us are listening as we are to your concerns so that we could appropriately direct you to the proper established committee as Mr. Padilla mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Sandra Miranda. I'm currently with the Department of Water and Power, and want to thank you sincerely, Council, for the past issues, and I guess we're going on 2 years now dealing with this issue. Like we said, we have been retaliated with management, the use and abuse of management. Here we are, we're dealing with this company. They had eliminated one of the Darren products, but rerouted it in with another company's name, same owner, and it gets worse this time. Now it's a 8-ounce Windbright, no company's name, no ingredients of what's in here, which is ammonia. So if you mix ammonia and bleach, it's very toxic. And the other thing is, it says a 10-ounce, but they change it and put a label and saying that it's an 8-ounce. Here again, they cut the label. They cut part of the label off. They patch it on a box. You talk about some violations, yet we get punished as the city workers and vendors, but here's a contract and nothing's done about it. Something needs to be done about it. I did write something, and I just want to go over this speech that I did write some time ago, and I think it's long overdue. To our great leaders, when one sole primary vendor controls the water of the well and decides who shall drink and who shall not, I then must question our great leaders. To preserve society is to preserve oneself by showing our future generation 200 years from now that people matter, not politics, not money, not one's political position or agenda. Whether you're the President of the United States or the mayor of a great city, you and I will always matter. Our future children who will arrive 200 years from now to know that our great leaders left behind a great legacy of people matters. You see, there is no value to money without people. There is no value to the auto industry without people. There is no value to a high-rise building or corporate government business without people. When we look into the future, what will you and I see? A world of integrity, self-dignity, love and respect for all mankind? For we still live in primitive time, no matter how sophisticated we think we have become with technology, medicine, or science. We will always be primitive. Man, woman, and child, technology and money, nor material will never replace man, woman, and child. You see, we are only here for a flicker. The lights will go out. What will be said about our great leaders? To give one sole primary vendor more power than God or the President of the United States of who shall eat and who shall not? Many lives have been impacted. People are running scared, fearing for their jobs, their livelihood. The truth to the great leaders, we turn to our great leaders for help to see that we do not become a third world country, to lower our standards of living and quality of life, or a more homeless society. When new election comes around, instead of digging up dirt or dirty laundry for one's political agenda to be elected, our great leaders must come together to reach into the future, not to repeat past history, but to create a new history of leadership. New leadership should say, people matter, money does not. All great things will happen. People don't care about how much you know until they know about how much you care. Thank you.
Mr. President, council members, we are known as the small capital of the world. But what we are also known for is that we have some of the greatest workers in the city, in the country. And we're hearing from them, and they're pleading with you, and they're telling you. I ask you again, please, please hear their cry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vanessa Dean and Dan Weissman, did you still wish to be heard?
I think everyone said Vanessa Dean.
Thank you very much. This will close general public comment for today's meeting. Mr. Zine, do you have a question?
Candido? If I can get his attention, please.
Well, Mr. Zine, why don't you just go up and talk to him at the rope?
I asked the people here, there's a new general manager at that department. Have you made an attempt to communicate with the new general manager? Because I was concerned that you discussing past history and past situations. Since you have a new general manager at that department, has there been an attempt to try and resolve some of these issues and concerns with him?
Mr. Zine, as an appointee to the Small Local Business Advisory Committee, my goal is only to make sure that their voices are heard. And so if they say they have, I don't question that. I just know that they say they have, and I go with that.
To verify you have had conversation with the new general manager? I'm sorry, not a fax letter. Have you had a personal meeting with him? That's my, okay, I would suggest that you establish the dialogue and establish a meeting, at least try there, because I hear your pleas, I hear your cries. You've been here many days discussing these serious concerns and issues. We want to resolve them, so I would suggest, since you have a new general manager, you make a personal appearance with him and discuss these issues, and maybe they can get resolved so your satisfaction can be met and we can come to completion on this. Okay. So I would suggest that be done.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for your support.
Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Next item, Mr. President, item number 8 was being held on the desk for a motion from Mr. Zine.
Mr. Zine, need a motion on item number 8.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to continue item number 8 till Friday, please.
Okay.
I understand
Any
that's the
objection?
deadline on this.
Any objection, colleagues?
Thank you.
Seeing none, item 8 is continued. Next item, please.
Item number 16 was called special by Councilmember Gruhl.
And we do have some speaker cards. Ms. Gruhl, would you care to speak first?
No, if we could have the public hearing first, and then we'll have both City Attorney and LAPD make a presentation after the public hearing.
Okay, members of the council, we have reopened the public hearing on this item, and as the City Attorney has advised me, this is a fair hearing matter. Colleagues, I'm going to ask for extra effort here on paying attention. So, as we reopen the public hearing, the council calls forward Officer Michael Lewis to address the council.
Yeah, Mike is going to be part of the presentation after the public hearing.
Okay, well then let's hear from Art Howard, Rudy Belmer, Donald Scheidel, and I'll introduce the other speakers as we proceed.
Council members, Art Howard, Executive Vice President of the Studio City Residents Association. We ask you to deny this appeal. This neighborhood has suffered for endless years with problems from the subject property, and it's a very strong need to keep conditions in effect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rudy Belmer, Studio City resident. I agree we should keep the conditions in effect, deny the appeal. This has been going on for quite some time. I live very close to the club, and this is a situation that should be resolved, but not by allowing them to continue on and not have the restrictions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Scheidel, followed by David Carlat, and Noel Weiss.
Donald Scheidel, and I agree with both Art Howard and Rudy Belmer. And what I would say, I've been living at this location, which is about 400 feet from the front entrance of that location since 1967, and it's a continuing problem. So I beg of you to adopt the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have David Carlat here? And Noel Weiss?
My name is Noel Weiss. Mr. Carlat, I guess, will follow me. I represent the landlord, the owner of the property. And just for the record, I would like to make a couple of requests. One, that the city attorney make a ruling to sever the appeal of the landlord from the appeal of the tenant. There's a basic dichotomy here in terms of the interests of the landlord versus the interests of the tenant. Secondly, and I don't know whether I can get that ruling in advance of my comments, but assuming that I can, I'll just continue here. And secondly, that basically any evidence, this hearing originally was in February of 2004, that any evidence and a record was comprised of the facts and events as of that date. Unfortunately, there was some extended delay apparently in the ZA issuing his opinion because it didn't come out until October 15th. So I would like the city attorney to rule or instruct the council, because the council, as we know, is sitting as our judges now and not legislators. So I would ask the city attorney to instruct the council to exclude any evidence outside of the record. That's, again, just for purposes of making it clear that the interest of the landlord is different than the interest of the tenant. Now, getting to the specifics, what we're talking about here factually is a situation where the landlord basically does identify with the interest of the community. Our desire basically is to try to obviously get this tenant to conform and do what needs to be done. We've acted aggressively to get, with the help of Councilwoman Gruhl, to get the police commission now involved. That's critical, that's important. But my concern is on behalf of my client essentially that the use of this zoning mechanism to enforce these nuisance abatement restrictions depreciates the value of my client's property, and it's really not fair because my client has never been accused of any wrongdoing. My client has never been found of any wrongdoing, and on the contrary, we have acted aggressively and affirmatively to basically get the problem resolved. In fact, such that the zoning administrator's determination found as of October 15th, based upon the record in February, that there wasn't any problems, and that's a reflection. So unfortunately, problems have arisen, and I think the appropriate response is to send this matter in light of these new facts, which you just heard, and presumably you'll hear from Officer Lewis, because there's some things that have occurred in the last 40 days, which frankly are troubling, and that's why we got police commission involvement here. But I think what needs to get done is to send this matter back to the zoning administrator so that they can then take those facts into account, and we can have the pressure of the zoning administration coupled with the police commission to basically get this tenant back in line. And I appreciate the opportunity to make those points. And I just for the record again would request at some point some ruling on the issue of the severance, because while I identify with the interests of the community and I've basically, done everything possible to get this problem resolved, it's very unfair to have these zoning restrictions on the property. Plus, by the way, I think city attorney enforcement as well of the violations is appropriate and should be undertaken. Thank you.
My name is David Carlat. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, in this case the appellant, Platinum Live, the operators of the facility. I've represented this applicant since 1999, and frankly we have a long history, a successful long history of compliance. The applicant is spent more than $3.5 million over the last 5 years in compliance. As Councilman Wendy Gruhl knows, it's a beautiful facility that has had her presence at it a number of times. Frankly, they're continuing to be punished for the actions of a previous tenant who is long since gone. And so the question today has to be asked, why are we here today after 7 years of compliance with the conditions placed by the city? Well, in February at the hearing, it's important to note that not the police department, not the council's office, not even the neighborhood association had one single complaint, not one single complaint against this club. So what has happened since February? Well, for reasons that will hopefully be explained by Zoning Administrator Dan Green today, his determination was delayed from February to October. And instead of giving additional relief to the conditions that he was entitled to, the club was entitled to, more conditions were imposed upon this facility. So you have to ask yourself, what happened from February to today that would have caused that to happen? And I think it's important for Wendy Gruhl to know today, if she's not yet aware, of two things that have occurred that may very well be affecting the decision of the council today that are, frankly, very unfair to this facility. First of all, the property next to this club has been sold. And in fact, in the audience today is the developer of that property. And that property is going to be developed as a hotel. And for whatever interest that hotel developer has, and the community has, it seems to be somehow affecting the progress, in my opinion, of the city to continue to provide relief to this club. Maybe it's not in the best interest, as a new developer may find, for this club to continue to exist. Second of all, in December, the operators of this facility formally executed their right to purchase this property from the current landlord. And curiously enough, since then, the landlord, instead of being, I would assume, elated that the property will no longer be his to be a concern of after all these years, has now found it in his interest to side with the neighbors and with the developer next door in an effort, in my opinion, to continue to create restrictions on this facility. So I guess only a full airing in this, if not here by the council in the courts, will eventually determine what in fact is behind the effort now to create further restrictions on this facility. But I can tell you, in my opinion, if this facility, which has operated now for some 7 years under conditions, has not been able to prove to the city under its nuisance abatement ordinance that a facility can operate, can abate a nuisance, and then be entitled to relief, then I don't think the city will ever find a case where they're going to be able to justify relief of conditions under the nuisance abatement ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This concludes public comment on this item. Colleagues, let me acknowledge first Councilmember Reyes, Chairman of the Planning Committee, and then Ms. Gruhl, representative of that district, and I'll let you two decide at what point in time we hear from staff. Okay. Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Council President. I want to thank my colleague, Councilmember Gruhl. Council members, back in April 15, 2003, this case came before Plum, and at that time we had a whole litany of issues that were impacting negatively the local community, not only the residential folks, but the commercial stakeholders as well. At that time, the zoning administrator came forth with a very sound analysis. It reflected a lot of research in terms of how this facility was impacting the area. Fast forward the past few weeks, the same issues arise, almost identical to what we heard a year or so ago. Again, the zoning administrator laid out his findings, spoke to the issues, and I just want to let you know that I want to applaud Councilmember Gruhl and her staff for being able to step up and advocate for the folks in the nearby area. So I just stand and encourage you to support the committee report. And I'd like to ask Councilmember Gruhl if she can elaborate on the technical and the community issues, but I want to thank her for her hard work, and I hope you can stand with the Plum Committee report. Thank you.
Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reyes, and I appreciate your leadership. And I served on the Plum Committee when we heard this in 2003, and it was one of the first issues I had to deal with relative to a club in my district and the impact. As many of you know, I'm a big supporter of businesses in my community and work hard to make them work. And a question was asked by one of the speakers today, why are we here today? Well, I'll tell you why we're here today. We're here today because this has been a problem since the 1990s. It's been active since the 1990s. And it started as an action. It was actually in Aftershock, which was in CD4 prior to being in my district. It was a young dance club. Later, while there were nuisance abatement conditions placed on the club, the Platinum Live operators took over, changed the club's format, and continued to operate. And we met with the new operators and said, things have to change, we're willing to work with you, and there have been several periodic reviews by the zoning administrator conducted with public hearings to gauge really the extent to which the club had complied with its conditions. And contrary to the statements you've heard today, bit by bit, some of the restrictions were released in an ability to respond to the fact that there were the change in the operators from the previous Aftershock. At the most recent public hearing, the Platinum Live owners and operators requested the full restoration of the operating hours. And the zoning administrator found that they declined to extend those hours of operation and asked that we still continue those conditions. The other comment was made suggesting that we were taking this action to assist some way the owner of the property that currently owns it. Well, the owner of the property isn't happy that we're putting these conditions on either. And the purchase of the adjacent property occurred after the zoning administrator's original decision there. And so I think that it's very important for us to note that we also have referred this to the Police Commission to review their operating requirements. Some of the things that have happened recently, there were shots fired at this club on New Year's Eve. There were 2 fights on the club at the same night in mid-December, and the club has violated its noise, parking, and security conditions in recent months. And in response to the owner's comments that they're okay and the tenant is bad, well, you know what? If you can't control the tenant and the operator, then the City of Los Angeles has to keep these restrictions in place. And we will do so until the community is protected. We will do so until this operator follows the rules and the laws that does not have these incidents occurring. We have present today, and I'd like to ask Officer Lewis, and I think from Vice, we have also Captain Chambers that is here today to come forward to the front table, as well as Sharon Seedorf Cardenas from the City Attorney's Office, because in fact we cannot separate the 2 appeals, and I know she will answer that question. If I could just briefly from the LAPD, if you'd like to share with my colleagues some of the recent problems. I know our senior lead officer, Mike Lewis, and I have had numerous conversations over the last 2 years of the problems at this particular location. And then afterwards, if we could have Sharon just from a legal perspective comment on our actions today.
Good afternoon, or good morning, Captain Mike Chambers from Vice Division. I have with me Senior Lead Officer Lewis from North Hollywood, who's been dealing with this situation for a great period of time, and also in support, Detective Eric Moore from my Vice Division that has been in support of North Hollywood. So I'd like to give it to the Senior Lead Officer who would be able to articulate the issues that he's had to deal with.
Good morning. My name is Officer Mike Lewis. I'm the Senior Lead Officer for Studio City, in which the club is situated on Ventura Boulevard. There's been some recent events that have been disturbing for the community as well as the Los Angeles Police Department. In November 25th, I received a report that there was a robbery inside the nightclub itself. After this report, I contacted the attorney representing the landlord, Noel Weiss, as well as the manager of the nightclub, David Seabag. We sat down, we had a meeting to go over the security provisions that were agreed upon previously and set forth by the zoning administrator, Daniel Green. During that meeting, the operator the manager of the nightclub admitted that he was not adhering to the security plan. The provisions that we had agreed upon were not in place. And actually that evening, Noel Weiss, who just testified, the attorney representing the owner, sat outside and was across the street from the nightclub, and he witnessed 2 fights in which a gentleman was thrown out in the middle of the street and could have been run over. He completed a written declaration as to his accounts of that evening. And a few days later, on the 31st, as the council person Wendy Gruhl alluded to, there were shots fired inside the nightclub, which further demonstrates the lack of security and how they're controlling their patrons and handling the nightclub as to what was agreed upon at our previous meetings. Because of all of these incidents, the police commission has agreed to set up a hearing and to investigate the cafe and entertainment license. And I think because of these incidents in the last 6 weeks or so, the LAPD is certainly against removing the operating hours that are currently in place.
Yeah. Hi, how you doing? I'm Detective Moore. I work the Vice Division. The Community Problems Unit, Nuisance Abatement, is my focus. I'm speaking on behalf of the zoning administrator and upholding his decision to maintain the conditions based on the fact that I've dealt with several nuisance abatements that have a similar nature in that it started out a supper club, they extended the hours, it turned into a nightclub, and there's invariably, when that occurs, the issues that you can expect to happen. What frequently happens is that when the use has changed from a supper club to a nightclub, then the behavior of the patrons is modified. Also, you get the instance where a lot of people that aren't even from the area that don't even go into the club, they come, they loiter, they litter, they sit in their cars, they play loud music, there's fighting and competition over who's going to date who, and in every case that I've dealt with that has had a supper club that has morphed into a nightclub, there's been problems. If it stays open past midnight and has that focus of a nightclub, then you can expect those issues, and that's pretty much my testimony.
Sharon? Don't go too far away in case any of my colleagues have questions, but. Sharon, if you could just address quickly the issue of the 2 appeals separation.
For the record, Sharon Seedorf Cardenas, City Attorney's Office. We believe that under the municipal code, the council does have the authority to place corrective conditions on both the owner of the property and the operator of the property when the property has been found to be a nuisance.
And thank you, colleagues, and I'll be brief. And I believe even if we could separate them, the position would still be the same, to deny the appeal, which is to approve the recommendation for Mr. Reyes' committee. And thank you again, Mr. Reyes, for your leadership on this. Colleagues, you all know that although Ed has his own district, being the chairperson of Plum, you get to know a little bit about all of our other districts, and I appreciate that you have taken the time, in this case, particularly to learn about the impacts on the community and to thank the community that is present here today. So, colleagues, I would ask that we deny the appeal and support the committee report today.
Mr. Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to concur with what Ms. Gruhl just presented to us and with how Mr. Reyes laid it out. I just want to reemphasize that this is a matter which was heard before Plum just recently. I sat on the committee at the time with Mr. Reyes. There was a full, fair, and complete and thorough vetting of the issue from both sides. There was, as there almost always is, a lot more testimony presented in Plum than in this council session. So if anyone is watching this council session and believes that the public hearing that just occurred is the sum total of views to be presented on this matter, they would be in error, because it is almost always the case that at Plum there is a more thorough, more comprehensive hearing, that also, because it is a 3-member committee that doesn't have this sort of formality of the wood and the gilt and the marble and all this stuff, enables a dialogue between council members, between city staffers, and people who are coming forward to make public comments. Based on that thorough proceeding. There is a report that is before you, and I would join Ms. Gruhl and Mr. Reyes in asking that you support that report because it was reached after a reasoned and thorough amount of consideration.
Mr. Ludlow.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a question, one question and then a comment. There was a reference to a police commission hearing that is being afforded, I guess set up for them. Just because I'm sure and several of us will have this similar issues at some point in time, and also for the appellant. Is there a what happens after that? Assuming that the police commission came out and absolutely agreed, or in the case that the police commission came out and said, you know what, we disagree. We think the Vice situation is better than has been reported. And then I want to make a comment.
There are two, if you don't mind, Mr. President, I'll answer that question, and maybe Sharon can, okay. The issue is, there are two separate. One is a zoning and planning issue that is before us today, which is relative to the hours of operation. What is going to go before the police commission is whether or not the current Platinum Live should be able to operate at all. And so you can ask the police commission to review their cafe entertainment license, and if they find that there's enough egregious actions that they could pull that permit. So two different, and we're going on two different parallel tracks.
Thank you for that clarification. I just wanted to say to the representatives who are here representing the supper club or the nightclub, I've listened to the comments that you've made today. I've listened to the points that you've raised, and I think a couple things that stand out. One is that there's been an absolute thorough process by the Plum Committee, and I think this has been followed to the letter. You did a fine job of presenting here today, but what's absent from that in terms of moving me is any real sign of major community support that your claims are in fact the case. What is compelling for me is having three representatives of the police department that in fact were meeting with you and having an opportunity to talk to you about corrective actions that could have been taken to avoid this step. And I think the council member in the district and the city officials have apparently given a very wide open door for those improvements, and it just doesn't sound like they've been made. We want to make sure, I want to make sure that in my vote that I send a strong signal that the city of LA and definitely this council member welcomes business in the city of LA, but I think the council member put it well. You'd absolutely have to take responsibility for the tenants, and when they begin to operate in a way that negatively impacts the surrounding community, shots being fired, fights, litter, and those types of activities, it becomes very compelling. And so I appreciate you coming in here today, but I'm going to support the committee's recommendation.
Mr. Zine.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I also support the committee's recommendation. I know that coming from the police department, the senior lead who represents that area is aware of the problems that are reported, and I'm sure there's many issues that take place where people don't take the time to report, or they're so frustrated they just throw their hands up and say no one cares. And when the police department gets involved, as they have, Vice Division and the Patrol Division and the nuisance on the community, and I'm aware of the facility. I haven't been there, but I was there years ago, and there's been problems and a long history. Maybe the new owners are trying to clean it up, but the history of that particular location in that area has plagued that community, and the people who live there, who pay taxes, have lived with this for a number of years. So maybe it's not all this owner that currently has the operation, but it's a long-standing history. I had a situation in my district where we met with the police department, met with the owner, and they enhanced security and they resolved the problems. But the clientele that visit the location are the ones who are creating the problems, and if management doesn't put safeguards in, it's going to continue. And we're not saying you got to close down your business. We're saying you've got conditions that are imposed to give a quality of life. We keep talking in the city about establishing a positive quality of life. That's exactly what this is about, establishing a quality of life for not only the patrons, but for the community that has to coexist with the establishment. So, Senior Lead Officer, I know that oftentimes you wonder, does the City Council listen? Does the City Council take action? Does the City Council get involved? You've got a council member who's very responsive, who's very receptive, and I think it was last week she was at an event at 5 o'clock in the morning, a Tagra task force, 5 a.m. in the morning. We were both there at 5 a.m. watching what the law enforcement officer was doing, the officers were doing. So we are concerned, we are committed to it, and I thank you for the time that you've taken out of your busy schedule, and all of the calls that have been generated from that location, if you start doing an inquiry on that, you'll find a lot of police resources have been dispatched. So to the community, we are listening, and to Wendy, thank you for bringing it forward, and for Mr. Green, his actions, and for the city attorney's office, also the police department, for the community of Studio City, we are listening to establish that quality of life we keep talking about. Thank you.
Mr. Reyes.
Colleagues, I was just commenting to Councilman Perry how Detective Moore has been, to me, one of those unsung heroes. He helped with some of our shutting down of our hotels. Now you find him across the city doing this work. So I want to thank him for his hard work, and our captain and our SLO and our LAPD for their hard work. They are very patient in committee. We try to bring them up first because we want them out on the street. But they've been tremendous work, and I just want to thank you guys for your hard work.
Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you. I just, colleagues, want to, when Mr. Zine was making the comments, you know, we're not closing this business. It is saying just follow the rules and restrictions that have been there. We have worked very closely to try to work, and the community has been there as well. So we just want the problems to stop, and in addition, for them to follow the rules. So again, thank you, colleagues, for all of your comments. It's very heartening to see your support for this, and for you to support the community and the Los Angeles Police Department on this effort. So again, ask that you support the Plum Committee today.
Other members wishing to be heard? Seeing none, let's open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
That is approved. Next item, please.
Item number 22 was called special by Councilmember Zine, and there is an amending motion that has been distributed to the council members.
Mr. Zine.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Fujioka, on this matter, there's an amending motion to add 2 additional positions, and what's happened in Mr. Fujioka's office, his department, CAO's office, is that employees who were very valuable during this time of budget preparation have left for other departments. So we're going to amend this to add 2 additional positions to the ones that are requested, and it's that Mr. Fujioka has a difficult task to perform without sufficient personnel to accomplish that and to get this budget produced by the scheduled date. So we would ask that Budget and Finance also signed off on this, personnel signed off on this, so we'd ask that in addition to what's requested on the schedule is that we have 2 additional positions. Mr. Fujioka, if you can just explain briefly those 2 positions.
Well, basically, there's 2 positions that are responsible for 2 of our larger budgets, being the fire department and the Bureau of Engineering. They recently, the incumbents, the prior incumbents, recently accepted positions with their, one with the fire department and the second with the Bureau of Sanitation, which leaves 2 critical vacancies at an important time in the development of the budget. So I've asked that if we can take this matter straight to council, and as stated by Councilman Zine, we had support from your personnel and Budget and Finance Committee to waive those items and put them on today's agenda. Thank you.
Other members wishing to be heard? Seeing none, let's open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
That is approved. Next item, please.
Item number 27, call special for cards from the public.
Okay, and the council calls forward Dr. Daniel Weisman, followed by Charles Grimmer and Jim McQuiston on item 27.
Was that the name you called earlier?
Excuse me?
For public comment? Was that the name you called earlier for
Yes,
public?
it was, sir.
I thought so. That was not my name, sir. No wonder I didn't come to public comment when you called.
Sir,
You didn't call my
are you
name.
here to speak on item 27?
I'm prepared to speak on this subject, and I'm sorry you didn't
Okay.
call my
This
name
is a public
correctly
hearing for
earlier.
item 27.
All right. I'm going to start by asking if any members are present in council today who are neighborhood council members of the Election Procedures Working Group. Seeing none, I'm going to present myself as one of the neighborhood council representatives who went to almost every one of these meetings that produced the document that's before you today. This is a very important document, a very good document. It's got something that has true empowerment of neighborhood councils. You glad to hear me say that, Ms. Hahn? I'm hoping so. Because this is a document that helps guide one of the most difficult processes that neighborhood councils have to do, their elections. It was put together by a large number of people whom you're going to hear from this morning, by Mr. Frank Martinez, our current city clerk, who was the assistant city clerk at the time, who did an extraordinary job of essentially writing this entire document. And from his background and his ability, I think that's one of the reasons this is such an outstanding and such a good document. You're going to hear from the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, who are on the committee. You're going to hear from the city attorney, Ms. Poindexter, who was on the committee. I volunteered to be on the committee as an at-large member and was denied, and then I told Ms. Poindexter, not entirely without my tongue firmly pressed into my cheek, that I think I'd be just as well not being a member of the committee because of Brown Act concerns. That's what I was going to talk to you about at public comment. The real bottom line here is that we have an issue that has come to you, and it has already achieved its purpose. These guidelines have already guided almost a dozen, I know of half a dozen elections since they were brought to their pretty well finalized form last spring. They're almost a year old, really. And amongst the councils that I'm participating in, almost all of them are using these guidelines. They are now being violated by Dunn in the Grassroots Venice election problem, in that Grassroots Venice in last June elected to have Dunn as their election administrator and had difficulty with their elections. Well, Dunn is still their election administrator, and item 4 in this document, in the independent election administrator discussion, specifically, and the committee specifically wanted to exclude Dunn from their influence in the elections. The real problem that I see is not that this isn't a good document. I do recommend that you accept it. I do ask it you remove one part of what you are being recommended, and that is the part that puts this into the plan. If you put this into the plan, what you're doing is you're adding empowerment to Dunn and taking empowerment away from the neighborhood councils. That is not what I think the neighborhood councils are all about. I would much prefer, and it may take some additional work and some additional documentation and some additional legal counsel, I would much prefer to see a neighborhood council populated oversight committee that reviews elections and finds when they're adequate, inadequate, proper, or improper, and refers them on for specific reparative action when action is necessary. By and large, the elections have not been a problem. The Grassroots Venice problem that I'll get back to right now was a problem because they included bylaws in their elections, not that their elections were bad. So a whole group of people elected in Grassroots Venice are not on their board. Their board is in limbo because of a Dunn implied technicality, and Dunn is still manipulating and interfering with their work. It brings to the bottom line that we have a whole new set of neighborhood councils now. The neighborhood councils we started with 2 or 3 years ago are not the councils we have now. The mayor goes out to the councils and asks for their advice on budget. The mayor goes out to the councils and asks for their advice on increasing the police and fire facilities that we have, and we'll discuss that tomorrow. The Department of Water and Power enters into a memorandum of understanding with the neighborhood councils. These councils, for them to be truly empowered, must have a level of independence and a level of First Amendment recognition that this particular document would impair if you put it in the plan.
Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to begin to conclude.
My last
You have other
sentence
speakers
is
waiting.
that the neighborhood councils do not need further control from a city agency. The neighborhood councils have the ability to control their own affairs in these matters, and will do so, I can reasonably assure you, within the realm of the city charter that started them.
Thank you.
I hope that you will then remove that section from this recommendation in your final deliberation today.
Charles
Thank you.
Gremmer and Jim McQuiston.
Honorable members of the Los Angeles City Council, my name is Charles E. Gremmer, and I'm the president of the West Hills Neighborhood Council. I am providing copies of a letter that I sent to Bonk some time ago. The attachment is not there because it is too numerous. Bonk and Dunn did address several of the problems that we put forth in that document. However, there are about 4 items that I and my council violently disagree with. And the first is the matter of having Dunn approve the individual procedures. The city charter and the enabling legislation states that Dunn shall assist the neighborhood councils. It does not say that they will approve them. The provision of having Dunn do the election procedures really flies in the face of both neighborhood councils and why they were established. Neighborhood councils were not established to be controlled by a city department. Neighborhood councils were established to help guide the city departments in the pursuit of their duties. Second is the proposed requirement that the elections specify the dates, hours, and locations. Now, this has to be taken into context with the schedule they give you. They're asking for the procedures 5 months in advance. West Hills Neighborhood Council cannot provide the date, the time, and the location 5 months in advance. Furthermore, having them in the procedures and having Dunn approve the procedures states that Dunn has the right to approve the time, place, and date of the election. Our elections in West Hills are stated in our bylaws to be held in the 2nd week of November. We depend upon the Los Angeles School District for a place to hold our elections. We cannot get the Los Angeles School District to commit an auditorium for our elections until the school term opens in September. And the earliest we have ever had approval is in the last week of August. Third, although the West Hills Neighborhood Council has enjoyed having the League of Women Voters as our independent elected administrator, and they've been very helpful to us, much of what is laid on the independent election administrator is really beyond the scope of what an elected administrator should be doing and encroaches on the authority of the neighborhood council. They have asked for the independent elected administrator to provide inputs to us on our draft procedures, approving the preparation of the ballots,
Sir,
and
may I ask
to
you to
even be
conclude
able
as well?
to postpone the election in the last minute if they so seem that the election should not be held.
Sir, we have another speaker waiting as
I'm
well.
sorry, sir?
We have another speaker waiting. I want to ask you to conclude.
All right. Fourth is the amount of paper that's being generated by this. We will have more than 144,000 pages of paper to produce, print, and distribute if we go through with the 4 election procedure distributions that they are requiring.
Thank you.
And I thank you very much for your attention. I would like to leave these here for the
So
city
I'll have the
council.
sergeant take that. Mr. McQuiston.
Jim McQuiston, East Hollywood Community Association. As you know, I've been associated very intimately with boosting neighborhood councils. I have no objection to the process that is before you. You'll notice that that process does not involve the city council. It's automatic. You'll also notice that in the charter says if the council takes no action, whatever the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners decided is in force. That means that you really don't have to take any action today. You can note and file this. I would strongly recommend that because item 2 on your agenda is a bone of contention. Item 2 says that you're going to command the city clerk to do something to amend the plan. Now, if you read your charter, you'll find out that the City Council is prohibited from doing anything about the plan unless the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners says, here is an amendment to the plan, and you don't have that in front of you today. So that means that the politic for this council is to note and file this. You can talk about it, you can encourage it, you can do anything you want. I have no problem with that whatsoever. You can even, if you eliminate item 2 in this, you can go ahead and put this out as a command. But this item 2 is a problem with the charter, and we don't want to have some malfeasant arguing against putting this into place just because you guys acted when you should have been silent.
Thank you, Jim. This concludes public comment for this item. Chair recognizes Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I make a few remarks, if Frank Martinez and Ms. Poindexter, if you'd like to come to the table and maybe just briefly walk the council through a little bit of the working group's process and how we came to this document that we have before us, and if you want to maybe even speak to a couple of those concerns about, 5 months beforehand, having know the actual time and date and location of an election. Just walk the council through how we got to where we got, and then I'll end with my comments.
Frank Martinez, Los Angeles City Clerk, and accompanied by Gwen Poindexter from City Attorney's Office. But today I'm actually reporting to you as the chair of the Neighborhood Council Election Procedures Working Group. The working group was put together pursuant to the Education Neighborhoods Directive after the Van Nuys Neighborhood Council resolution dispute. And the group was ultimately formed with 10 neighborhood councils, a board of neighborhood commissioners, League of Women Voters, city attorneys, city clerk, and Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. We worked for a year developing these procedures. We took extensive public comment. After the procedures were fully developed, we then held additional hearings in the community. So we had a great deal of public input, and these procedures, although it's been attributed that I wrote them, the fact of the matter is they were organic in nature. They were written by the group, and everybody had equal input. The procedures lay out several key elements to elections. First of all, transparency. The procedures require a great deal of notification and a notice to the public of the upcoming elections. The procedures are flexible. They allow neighborhood councils to customize their specific election, drawing from different aspects of the procedures. There's a standardized process for resolving challenges, and it empowers neighborhood councils because it draws from the neighborhood councils to resolve the challenges to elections. Contrary to what you have heard, these procedures specifically define and limit the role of DUN relative to elections. It makes it clear what they do and what they do not do. So in effect, they are actually making the election process more empowering to the neighborhood councils. Now, relative to the time frames, the procedures do require that neighborhood councils get started early in planning their elections. However, the key date is 90 days before the election. The procedures need to be approved. And I would submit, if you don't know your polling place and you don't know your hours of election 90 days before, you're not ready to hold your election. So to me, that is the key date, 90 days out from the election, procedures approved, everything in place. The procedures do require a great deal of effort on the part of the election administrator, but that effort is being done today. This provides them a template and guidance on how to do that. It does not prohibit that election administrator from utilizing the resources of that neighborhood council to conduct the election. It just puts somebody in charge that is independent from the outcome of the election. And so in our view, these are reasonable procedures. They empower the neighborhood councils, and they provide for reasonable planning. All of you go through the election process, and I think you can all understand the need for predictability, a need for rules and regulations, if you will, a need for consistency in conducting an election process.
And I'd like for Gwen to address the issue of amending the plan and the importance of having this referenced in the plan.
Yes, thank you. Gwen Poindexter, Assistant City Attorney. First, just as a reminder, the City Council was the initial entity that adopted the plan from the very beginning back in 2001. That was your obligation as part of the city charter. So, in fact, that is the responsibility of the City Council. BONC does not have independent authority to make plan amendments or changes to the plan. And the charter also makes reference to any subsequent amendment that would come before the City Council. So there's certainly the jurisdiction for City Council to act in that regard. And in fact, the City Council has made already a subsequent amendment to the plan with respect to the funding program. The reason why the working group recommended that there be some reference to the election procedures in the plan is that decertification of a neighborhood council is triggered by a violation of the plan. So one of the sanctions that was discussed by the working group was that if violations of these election procedures occur, there was a need to have some sort of sanction imposed, and without a reference to the plan, a violation of the election procedures would technically be unenforceable. And because of the problems that have occurred in the past, it was important that we felt that a reference be placed in that plan that would indicate that a violation of the election procedures could trigger decertification. The ultimate decision maker for decertification hearings would be the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners, so there would be a public hearing process. Actual legal findings would have to be made to determine whether that would be sufficient to trigger decertification. So there are definitely due process mechanisms already built in the plan that would accommodate an applicant that's involved with that kind of process. The other thing I just want to point out in terms of Dunn's limited role in approving the election procedures is that one of the key responsibilities that's set forth in the plan, which is item number 1, is that Dunn is charged with implementing and overseeing compliance with city ordinances and regulations that relate to the city-wide neighborhood council system. So even though, yes, they do act as a body that assists neighborhood councils, they also act as a body that is supposed to assure compliance with all the procedures that we have enacted with this program.
Thank you, and I want to thank both of you for your hard work in this effort. And Gwen has been such a great city attorney assigned to our work on neighborhood councils, and I'm sure it's been a great education for her, but she's been such a fair and wise woman in continually trying to guide us as we move forward in growing up our neighborhood councils. And I will say, Frank really added such a great level of expertise to this working group. You know, Frank, as our city clerk, certainly has the expertise on running elections for a municipality. But Frank has never really, neighborhood councils were really never his thing or his passion, which is why he brought a very really unbiased, objective view to how we should run elections. And members, what you have before you today is the result of over a year of hard work from the Neighborhood Council Election Procedures Working Group. And this group was comprised of Neighborhood Council leaders and was chaired by Frank Martinez. This group included the support of the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, the League of Women Voters, and the City Attorney's Office. And as we continue to move into this, what I call the brave new world of neighborhood councils in the city of Los Angeles under the city charter, we've realized that we probably need to develop a set of standards to ensure neighborhood council elections are fair, open, and inclusive. I think probably you have experienced what I've experienced in my office is probably more calls and grievances and frustrations about elections in our neighborhood councils than almost anything else. And these procedures set out standards that require, for example, neighborhood councils determine that they are conducting their election, making it public and final at least 90 days before their election date. These procedures allow flexibility to allow neighborhood councils to craft their own procedures to find what best fits their needs, whether it's vote by mail or having multiple polling sites. These procedures set out a standard method of resolving election challenges by creating a pool of trained volunteers from neighborhood councils across the city who will act as arbitrators or final decision makers when there is a problem or a potential problem or a challenge with elections. And I believe that this policy will go further in the empowerment of neighborhood councils. With the additional election support from Dunn, as well as a clear roadmap for their use in elections, neighborhood councils, I believe, will be better equipped to have successful elections and then to focus their efforts on the really important matters in their community and their charge of weighing in to us on decisions that we make that impact their lives. So I ask for your support. I believe we do need to amend the plan so that it makes reference to this document in the plan, so from now and forever, people will know that we have a standard election procedure document that really was crafted by a large number of people who have an interest in neighborhood councils. Thank you.
Ms. Perry.
Just one quick question for either the city attorney or the city clerk, and I do want to support these new plans, but was there any thought given to the age of people voting? Are there limitations on that? Because in my district, I've had some allegations of 12-year-olds voting in elections, and I just wanted to find out if there had been any discussion on that and if there are any legal limitations on that.
We specifically discussed that issue because it was brought up, and we ultimately came down that we could not dictate age in the election procedures, but we specified that they need to consider that, publish that, and so that everybody knows going in what the age of the voters will be. And Gwen has some issues to discuss relative to bylaw amendments as the appropriate.
And one follow-up question, and if 12-year-olds are, say, allowed by the bylaws to vote, does that also mean that children can vote on how to spend money?
No, Gwen Poindexter again, City Attorney. We've specifically have advised neighborhood councils that because of the Political Reform Act implications of a minor making a decision about funding, that would implicate their role as a public official, and we've strongly advised neighborhood councils that they should create bylaws that would prevent their minors from engaging in those activities. And most, if not all, neighborhood councils have followed that advice to avoid those kind of implications.
And I've made no secret of the fact that I've had some serious concerns about some of the neighborhood councils in the southern part of the district taking in blocks of children to, participate in elections and things like that. And an even greater concern about our making sure that money is spent the way it was intended to be spent on city-related activities in the neighborhood, public works, things like that, and my concern is still ongoing. I just want you to know that and say that for public consumption, because I think the activities have not ceased.
Well, the city attorney can certainly look at that issue, and it would be up to the city council if it wanted to craft some sort of regulation or prohibition in the plan that would limit the age.
And it's not so much an age thing, it's also age plus way money is spent, way it is tracked, and whether it is in compliance. And I told Mr. Nelson this morning I would give him some follow-up notes on that.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, and I appreciate what you're doing here, and I want to support this. I have one concern, and that is, first of all, if you think you have a problem, Jan, I had a neighborhood council that actually allowed dogs to vote, but not cats, because cats are not trustworthy. So we're resolving the discrimination of cats issue, but moving on, I think that's an anomaly. But I think there was some obvious need for reform of our election procedures in neighborhood councils in general. My question is the question Mr. Grimmer brought forth, and that is flexibility and the timing. If you're planning a November election and you do it at a school, LA Unified, you can't talk them to the summer. They're not there. There's no one in the office. We'll give you a commitment. And if you have a 90-day requirement, there's a technical impossibility that you reach, that you've got to virtually go in on the 90th day to the school and try and get a commitment from them, and that's not always possible. LA Unified is not the easiest people in the world to deal with. So I want to know what kind of flexibility there is in this, that if they've made an approach, they have a tentative commitment, is that sufficient to allow them to proceed, knowing full well that they haven't locked it up because LA Unified is not easy to work with?
I can also attest that LAUSD presents its challenges relative to polling places, but obviously, you have to take into account the realistic situation that you're in. At 90 days out, you would say, this is where we intend to hold our election at such and such a school. Remember, there's a 60-day requirement that the election procedures actually have to be adopted in a publicly noticed meeting. So you still have another 30 days before that publicly noticed meeting. Now you're 60 days out. By then you should be able to lock it down. But obviously, if the procedures indicate we're going to do it at such and such a school, and then there was a change, that is something you'd want to address, and you might have to move off your elections if everybody thought they were going one place and then you changed.
But what if your bylaws mandate your election time is on a November date? How do you move off of that?
Well, in that case, you might want to look at your bylaws if you're having this as an ongoing problem. But I suspect if you're able to 90 days out say this is where we're going to do it, and it's just a matter of locking it down with the final official authority, that shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, so there's a modicum of flexibility, but you want a locked-in-stone public notice of a place 60 days out.
Yeah, I think the issue that you found out, that where you've had troubles in elections, in neighborhood councils, has been when very close to the election or when it's actually underway, they're still making changes.
Yeah, okay. So then your advice would be to West Hills, take a look at your bylaws, make them a little more flexible, which will allow you to use that 60 days, and then...
Or go to the school now, while they're in session,
they
and
won't
say...
give you that commitment.
Well, they might not give you, but say, hey, we're going to be doing this every year, do you see a problem? Kind of try to get a basic level of understanding.
They'll give you a basic level of understanding, but no commitment, and you need a commitment. So that's the point, is you're leaving them a very narrow window of opportunity should that fall out. Now, realistically, it probably won't, but they have to have some flexibility. So the only way then would be for them to amend their bylaws to say it must be held in the month of November, which would allow them a little more flexibility, but you still will require 60 days as a firm public notice. Okay.
We believe that's pretty much the basic minimum you should have going into an election.
Yeah. Now, what happens to LA City when we hold elections and on election day we show up at a polling place and there's nobody there, or they forgot? What do we do?
We have extensive backup procedures in place, as you know. We do two things. Number one, we have mobile polling places, so if a polling place burns down the day before the election or has some other problem, we can roll an RV specially outfitted to be a polling place to that location. If the polling place changes not right before, but a few days before, we also can post people and direct them to an alternate polling place, which is another thing people could do. And finally, if crews don't show up, we have backup crews to be dispatched to polling places.
Then shouldn't we require in their plan that they say this is where we're going to hold it, but here's our backup plan? Because why should they have a different set of rules than we as a city government have?
Well,
why should you say to them, if your school falls out at the last minute, you can't have your election. If you don't have it 60 days locked down and that's it, you don't have your election, when we don't do that to ourselves. And we're a legally mandated agency to do this. So shouldn't you then ask them just for a backup plan that's thought out in advance? Should something fall out, then they have a plan?
Because of their unique situation, they could certainly incorporate that into their plan. In other words, they could say...
I'm suggesting you should incorporate that. You should say to them, what is Plan B?
Right. I mean,
so you have a 60-day notice that this is our plan, and should there be a problem, here's our backup plan. So everybody knows it up front.
Absolutely, they could do that.
Okay. Well, I'm not asking you if they could do that. I'm suggesting you do that so that there is a backup plan for everybody, so that if they run into a problem, you don't just invalidate the election and put the whole thing off. Because under your plan right now, if they don't have it locked up 60 days out and there's no notice, there's a change after 60 days, you're saying they can't have an election.
Well, I'm saying that when I'm saying they could do that, what I'm saying is Dunn has an election administration staff that assists them in developing their procedures. So Dunn can certainly take this under advisement and say, yeah, let's make sure that everybody has alternative polling place locations in case something falls out. That's certainly doable and
it's
workable.
part of the public notice.
And it's part of the public notice.
Would you accept that as a friendly amendment, just instruct the staff to implement that and add that in?
That's not a
With that,
from
all right,
from our
Mr. President, so I move that the department be instructed to request a backup plan as part of the public notice 60 days before the election, so that all the neighborhood councils have a Plan B as a part of the public notice.
Okay. Ms. Hahn, is that a friendly amendment, or you want to have a separate vote on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a burdensome amendment. I think, again, what we have to always remember, these are volunteer neighborhood councils.
But procedurally, right now, Ms. Hahn, do you want a separate vote on it, or no?
I would like to have this working group review that and see if that's something they would like to do.
Okay. Mr. Reyes.
And all these procedures, they're very complicated. There's a lot of steps. What complicates it more is when you're dealing with communities with many languages. So if you want to be inclusive, the neighborhood councils want to be a reflection of the communities that they represent. And it's only one language. How are we addressing that dynamic? Has it been raised? How's that being folded in?
The election procedures specifically direct the neighborhood council to produce their election materials in the languages that are reflective of their community.
So we do have the ability for folks who don't speak English to participate.
That's correct.
Great, and that happens throughout the election procedures and
the various meetings, the various announcements that go out and so forth. And actually, so far, that's been one of the strengths of many of the neighborhood councils, is making sure that all that material gets out in the various languages of their community.
Great. And the proceedings themselves, as they're conducting their meetings, is that a requirement, or is that up to the neighborhood council?
That I'm not...
Yes, Councilman, that's pretty much up to neighborhood councils, although the spirit of the plan makes reference to a diversity component, so arguably there is a complaint process in the plan, so if there are complaints that there's not enough outreach to different communities, that can be filed with the department and they can take a look at that. But the whole basis of the program is really includes diversity in those elements that you're referring to.
And again, my focus is accessibility. How do we create access and making sure folks who don't feel that part of the community can become part of the community and that they're not being pushed out or left out. Thank you.
Mr. Zine.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the members of the Neighborhood Council that have traveled here today. I know Chuck comes from the far west San Fernando Valley, and you probably woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get here, and thank you for being here, and also the other representatives. And I know that Janice and I served on the Charter Commission, and when we envision neighborhood councils, we envision a very smooth process without a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of red tape. That's unfortunately been the case. With something that occurred in one community where construction workers were bussed in, did votes, and had a little party afterwards. Is there anything in the procedures, when we talk about stakeholders, you could talk about someone who travels through a community being a stakeholder. Were any of those issues discussed with the committee that was established?
There was a great deal of discussion about stakeholder status, candidate status, verification procedures, and all of those attendant issues. But basically, at a minimum, if you live, work, or own property in an area, you are a stakeholder. So if you work in an area, you're a stakeholder and you have a right to participate in that election. But the procedures do take you through a process of stakeholder registration, if that's the way that neighborhood council wants to go. It takes you through a process of provisional voting. It takes you through a process of outreach and notice to make sure all segments of the stakeholder community know about the election, so that there's less likelihood that one segment or another can stack the election. But that doesn't mean that a well-organized group within a neighborhood council can certainly turn out the vote, and that's their legitimate right to do so.
And with the question of age, the question of identification, I heard the comments earlier regarding the age when it comes to expenditures. What about the requirement, if any have identification that's required?
What the election procedures allow is for the neighborhood council, consistent with their bylaws, if their bylaws don't already address it, to establish whatever stakeholder verification process they're going to utilize. But what's very clear is, number one, it has to be consistent. It can't be applied to some stakeholders and not others. And number two, picture ID Picture ID cannot be the only identification acceptable. So you have to give a range of identification type documents that could be used, such as utility bills or other types of things, so that, again, you're not targeting, say, a particular group such as the homeless or whatever that might be differentially impacted by particular identification requirements.
So, look, neighborhood council, we've got 80 neighborhood councils now?
85.
81?
85.
85. And we anticipate having how many at the end?
I think up to 97, but probably Mr. Nelson could better answer that, but that's how I've calculated it.
So somewhere around 100.
100.
At the end. In each, an individual neighborhood council can establish within their bylaws the rules, the election procedures will then fold into that. So we could basically have 100 or thereabout different procedures when it comes to the election.
Well,
as far as the criteria for the identification requirement, for example, you live in this community, they're going to require some identification. Another community say, we don't need identification.
That's correct. It is up to the neighborhood council, and there are neighborhood councils who simply require a self-affirmation statement. I'm a stakeholder, this is my status, and I'm ready to vote. There are other communities that require identification, but they're given a laundry list, if you will, of alternative identification forms, documents that they could utilize. So it is up to the neighborhood council. Again, we had to be careful not to transgress that line where we were dictating exactly how they do the elections. That's why this document is flexible, but it requires consistency in how you treat your stakeholder voters. And
So whatever plan they adopt, that will be the plan for that particular period of time, that election. They can then modify it if they wish and choose one of the other procedures within the process.
Yeah, and I would expect that to occur from time to time based on their experience in an election. They might add a component such as vote by mail, or remove a component such as vote by mail, or add multiple polling places instead of just one, add longer hours of voting. There's many variations they could utilize, and I would expect these things to evolve over time.
And just one final question. When it comes to the candidates giving their statement or passing out information, is there a procedure where that's done prior to the vote being taken, or can they just come in and say, I want to vote for these candidates that are on the ballot, or is there some kind of requirement that the candidates give a statement or be given an opportunity to give a statement before the vote is taken?
There are required candidate forms that occur before the election, but it also allows additional flexibility in terms of that particular neighborhood council and how they want to get additional information out to the voting public. But there is required candidate filing process, a very open process, a public notification of who the candidates are, and an opportunity to participate in the candidate forum.
Well, the one that I visited, they had the candidate statements taken after or during the voting process. For example, the polls opened at 7 o'clock, the candidates spoke at 7:30, and some people said, I don't know who these candidates are, and by the time the candidates spoke, the votes had already been taken for a number of candidates. Is there a process where that's been addressed or corrected, where you say, if you're going to come vote, we encourage you to come vote, but at least listen to these folks for 3 or 5 minutes before you cast your vote?
Well, we've provided for candidate forums and as well as election information meetings prior to the election, but ultimately it's up to the neighborhood council to address the specifics of how those candidate forums are going to work. But those would occur before the election. If they want to do additional things on the election day, want to have additional opportunities, they certainly can build those in. But I've witnessed neighborhood council elections with that very same process, where candidates were speaking while people were already voting. I think you have to also realize, though, that there are many neighborhood council members who express the views to us that, hey, if they want to come in and just vote and leave, they don't necessarily want to listen to all the candidates, and that's their right to do that. It's the right of the voter to determine how much information they need to make their choice.
And just to specify, we do allow for the same-day election format, which includes a campaigning activity, but the bylaws or the election procedures would have to specify how that would work. Again, that might seem unusual, but we were trying to make systems that were flexible because, again, the charter says that the regulations that we adopt can't restrict the method by which the neighborhood councils choose to select their board members. So we wanted to provide a document that was inclusive as possible of all the various systems that we knew were out there.
Okay, thank you. Again, I want to thank the representatives from the neighbor councils that are here this morning to address this issue, which is very, very important to keep our democratic process and those neighbor councils moving forward in a positive fashion. Thank you.
Ms. Hahn.
Thank you. And again, members, we walk a delicate balance here, as Dennis and I remember. When we crafted the, Section 900 of the city charter, we tried to be vague. We tried to not be too specific because we believe Los Angeles was so diverse that one size did not fit all in terms of neighborhoods. And I think we're finding that out. But I think what we have before us is a document that gives specific election procedures that make it fair, open, and honest, while leaving a little room for flexibility so that neighborhood councils can still add their own flavor to their elections procedures. But I don't envision us having 100 different election procedures. We have the standard procedures here with a little room to tweak some of the elements of the procedure. The other thing we're doing today, colleagues, if we adopt this, is we are instructing the Board of Neighborhood Commission to review this in no less than 2 years. So we want a good review of these procedures to see where we might have had problems or where we might in the future change it, tweak it, whatever. So I think that's a good thing. That was a recommendation from the working group, and I think that's what we should also adopt today. So I ask for your support on this.
Other members wishing to be heard? Seeing none, let's open the roll.
Excuse me, Mr. President, the motion of Mr. Smith, it didn't have a second, but if it does get a second, did that go to committee?
Is that, Ms. Hahn, not a friendly separate vote on that? Is that okay? Is that sufficient with Mr. Smith? Okay. With that clarification, let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
That is approved. Next item, please.
Next item is item number 35, and that was called special by Councilmember Reyes.
Mr. Reyes.
Yes, thank you, Council President. I rise to support this effort by my colleagues, Councilmember Tom LaBonge, but I do want to bring something out to the full council, and it's a trend that I see happening, and it's a policy issue I believe we'll have to discuss in the near future, but I want to use this opportunity to shed some light on this process. We've been very proactive in trying to bring to fruition many of our planning policies, the community overlay zones that we've been pushing, and other protective measures that speak to our historic fabric, how we preserve our communities. The fundamental point here, though, is that we don't have enough personnel in the planning department to do all of these requests. We've been getting a large number of requests coming forward. The trend I see, colleagues, is that it seems that the areas that have the ability to pay to move these items up front are rising in number, which means we can move personnel because now we can pay for their time to get it done. Unfortunately, the flip side of that is the areas that are not as wealthy, the areas that don't have the capacity to pay for that personnel, don't have the same ability to promote these policies and to implement them. And I've been going through this mantra where I've shown you how this city has evolved and how one side of the city has all these police, planning, protection measures, and the other side has very little or none. So the question becomes, and it's a discussion we need to have in committee, but I invite you and ask you for your input and how we're going to try to level this playing field so we don't continue exacerbating this tale of two cities. So I do want to applaud Councilor LaBonge and the other colleagues who have been being creative in how to implement their policies. But the truth is, we have to start looking at how we increase the personnel staff in the planning department to address these issues, or are we going to continue on this trend in which we allow the city to continue to evolve in a very lopsided fashion, where parts of Central LA, South LA, East LA, Northeast LA don't have the planning support not only in implementing these policies, but how they address neighborhood councils, homeowner associations, and the rift continues to grow. So both Councilor Labange and I spoke a little to this issue. I want to support him in this effort, but this is a trend I see emerging, and I need to bring this to light. And it should be a factor that we talk about in our budget process, because we have to be very clear what we're doing to our city. And we have to be very clear on why certain areas aren't getting that service. And it's obvious that there's certain parts of the city that can afford to pay for that service. And therein lies the dilemma. So thank you very much, Council President.
Other members wishing to be heard? Seeing none, let's open the roll on this item, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
13 eyes.
That is approved. Madam Clerk,
Mr. President, do you wish to clear the desk before going into closed session?
let's do housekeeping.
Council has motions for posting and referral.
Motion shall be posted and referred.
The excuses on the desk, Councilmember Hahn requests to be excused on the following Fridays to leave at 11:30 for city business, May 27th, July 29th, September 30th, and November 18th, and those all meet council policy.
Ms. Hahn is excused.
And Councilmember Hahn also requests to be excused Tuesday, March 22nd, and the 23rd for city business. That meets council policy.
Ms. Hahn is excused.
Council President Padilla requests to be excused Wednesday, February 16th, and Friday, February 25th for city business. Those meet council policy.
That excuse is granted.
Councilmember Labange requests to be excused Friday, February 4th for personal business. That meets council policy.
Mr. Labange is excused.
Councilmember Perry requests to be excused Wednesday, January 26th to arrive at 10:45 for city business. A motion is required.
Mr. Zine moves. Ms. Perry is excused.
And Councilmember Cardenas requests to be excused February 8th for city business. That meets council policy.
Mr. Cardenas is excused.
And that clears the desk.
Okay. Anything else before going into closed session? Mr. City Attorney?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Parks is required to recuse himself from items number 36, 37, 38, and 43.
Okay. If there's nothing further, then in conformance with California law, the council will now adjourn into closed session. Sergeants, please clear the chambers. Welcome back into open session. Madam Clerk, next item before us, please.
First item before council is item number 36, and that's settlement of 3 cases, M. Quintana versus Gates et al., and that's in the amount of $200,000.
Let's open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
12 eyes.
That is approved. Next item.
Next item is item number 37, and that's in the case of Jesse Alvarez versus City of LA et al., and that's in the amount of $300,000.
Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
12 eyes.
That is approved forthwith as well. Next item.
Item number 38 is settlement in the case of Alan Weiner versus City of Los Angeles, and that's in the amount of $450,000.
Please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
12 eyes.
That is approved forthwith.
And the last item before council is item number 43, and that's settlement in the case of Christopher Kenefick versus City of LA et al., and that's in the amount of $546,000.
Please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
12 eyes.
Forthwith.
And that clears the desk.
Great. Colleagues, that's the end of our agenda today. Thank you for hanging in there. Any announcements today? Announcements? Mr. Labange? Always something going on in Hollywood. Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Colleagues, you may have seen in the news that the Los Angeles Dodgers Caravan has embarked throughout Southern California, and we welcome the Caravan today to Irving Middle School, which just happens to have the best attendance record in the district this year. So congratulations to all the folks over at Irving. But it was wonderful to see real-life Dodgers of today and yesterday, from Steve Garvey to some of the newer acquisitions, be able to go there right into the heart of Washington, Irving, and Glassell Park. And I know that there's going to be some other stops coming up as well, which you can check out at Dodgers.com. And it was nice to see our home team and a lot of blue there.
Thank you, members. There was a great announcement in the paper today. The Getty is going to receive the life work of Julius Shulman, the great photographer, 94-year-old photographer who happens to live in my district, but he has been absolutely tremendous as an architectural photographer. There's no one else like him, and the Getty is so happy to receive his work for their archive. Julius Shulman's wonderful work will be there at the Getty for future visitors as well as Angelenos to enjoy, and we congratulate Julius Shulman for his continued good work. He's been very anxious for this matter, and as the paper reported, he's doing a great job of organizing. He was very detailed on every photograph he took, and it helps. So these will be always in the archives as well as for public viewing at the Getty. Big, great news.
Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you, Mr. Padilla. Colleagues, as you know, we all adopted a resolution earlier regarding this being the Homeless Count Week in the city of Los Angeles. So tonight, beginning tonight, we have volunteers all over the city of Los Angeles who will be going out and trying to get a number, as difficult as that is, but to assist us in the future in being able to compete for federal dollars and acknowledging the challenge that we have. And I know Ms. Perry has the largest homeless number in the city of Los Angeles, but I'll be out in the Valley tonight with some of our volunteers going out and trying to get a number. So I just want to thank the volunteers, and if you are in the city and you see people walking around at 10, 11 midnight, that's what we're doing tonight to try to assist in helping the homeless. Thank you.
Other announcements? Ms. Perry.
I'll just add to what Ms. Gruhl said. Thursday night, the count will be taking place in Central and South Los Angeles, so that will include the Skid Row area and parts of South Los Angeles. So you'll see census takers out Thursday evening trying to count homeless people.
Other final announcements? If not, colleagues, let me ask you to please rise for adjourning motions. And ask that a special adjournment in memory of Johnny Carson be part of today's record. Colleagues, as you know, Johnny Carson for 3 decades hosted The Tonight Show and made it one of America's most influential programs and entertaining programs. He passed away Sunday at the age of 79. When his retirement was announced in 1991 from The Tonight Show, and I think this really captures the impact he had on America as well as the industry. Then Bob Hope described it as one of the heads falling off of Mount Rushmore. Carson was not the first Tonight Show host. Steve Allen and Jack Paar preceded him, but he carried the format to previously unimagined heights during his tenure. He's frequently credited with giving vital early breaks to other top-rated late-night hosts, including Jay Leno and David Letterman, as well as a legion of stand-up comics, including David Brenner, George Carlin, Billy Crystal, Joan Rivers, and Jerry Seinfeld. He was an amazing host beginning in 1962 when he was introduced, and Mr. LaBonge would know this because he's our historian, by Groucho Marx. And he went on to host more than 7,500 hours of television and weathered numerous late-night challenges, including competing shows featuring Joey Bishop, Merv Griffin, Joan Rivers, Pat Sajak, Alan Thicke, and others that all came and went during his tenure. Born in Corning, Iowa, Carson was raised in Norfolk, Nebraska, where he began his career as a teenager. He served in the Navy and moved to Los Angeles in the year 1950, becoming an announcer at the local CBS station KNXT, now known as KCBS Television Channel 2. He ascended to network television at the age of 29, headlining a daytime show and substituting on the CBS morning show. In 1957, he began to host what became a popular ABC daytime show, Who Do You Trust?, which first paired him with Jim McMahon. He was a very private person for being such, Ed McMahon. confused my McMahons there, was very much, despite his public personality, known as a very private person whose passions included astronomy, tennis, and a passion for the sea. He hosted the Academy Awards on 5 occasions, and his list of honors include 6 Emmys, the Peabody Award, and a Presidential Medal of Freedom bestowed upon him by President George H.W. Bush in 1992. He will be missed. Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you, Mr. Padilla. And just briefly to add one other additional note, and tomorrow at the annual State of Hollywood address, I know we'll be doing a little tribute for Johnny Carson as well. But one of the most important things to our city that Johnny Carson did was when he inherited the Tonight Show, it was in New York City, which was dominant in television in those days. And moving the show as he did from Rockefeller Center to the West Coast studios really helped establish the West Coast and this city, which was dominant in movies, as also a dominant production center for television as well. And so this whole area really owes him a debt of gratitude for having done that and turned Los Angeles into what it is today.
Including downtown Burbank.
Exactly, and I just wanted to
Mr.
accent
LaBarge.
that. It was a tremendous significance in 1972 when someone left New York and came here, and he certainly did. But what is a tribute to the man, not just what Alex spoke of and what Eric and I just commented on about his movement here, is when you find out after someone dies what they did without telling anybody. And one of the broadcasts last night had Dr. Lois Lee, who many of us know from Children of the Night. He spent over several $1 million helping her establish a permanent facility for young women in the San Fernando Valley to deal with the issues that face young runaways and others who come here and hit some of the tough streets of Los Angeles. $1 million, and there was a little note they showed. I'm very happy to be able to help out. If you need more, let me know, Johnny. And what a fella, too, to be at the top of his game in 1992. He was absolutely amazing how he spoke. And when he would speak, you know, he'd say, Ronald Reagan said, and he would say what Ronald Reagan said and have a completely tremendous humor to whatever he said without destroying people in the sense of how some comedy is done today. He truly was an amazing American, and I'm just so pleased to know that he is being tributed as great as he has been. There's nobody else like him. As David Letterman said, he was the top, and everyone else came second. And it was, I don't know how I stayed up that late, but I did. I did, to always watch Johnny on his monologue, and he had the absolute best sidekick, as he referred to it, Ed McMahon. So God bless Johnny Carson, and I know there'll be tributes. He does have a park named for him in the Burbank area, and Burbank really was put on the map by his monologue and his movement there to the Burbank studios and NBC and here in the West Coast. Thank you.
Other tributes? Ms. Perry.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would like to adjourn in memory of Brenda McCarvey. She was born to her parents, Amos and Bobby Grissom, on November 16, 1957, and she was their only child. She attended and graduated from John C. Fremont High School, and they dedicated their lives to helping her to achieve the great things in her life. She leaves behind her only child, Brian Barrett, who, under the eyes of his mother and maternal grandmother, has accomplished great athletic and scholastic heights. She will be remembered and missed by all who knew and loved her. And I have one more. Lonnie Dean Christian, formerly of Corona, California, passed away on January the 17th in Kingman, Arizona, where he recently retired. He is survived by his wife, Sharon Christian, mother Donna, children Julie Roth, Jeff Christian, Jill Woody, Tim Stapp, and Donnie Stapp, 11 grandchildren, sister Rita Barker, brothers Scott and Larry. He was preceded in death by his father, Florian, and his brother Wally. He attended Lakewood High School, then served 4 years in the U.S. Marines as a jet engine mechanic, and he spent his remaining years in home construction. He was a master in many areas of the carpentry trade and completed many beautiful projects. He was known as being very charismatic, and something magic happened whenever he entered a room. Conversations with him were always easy and fun, and a hug from him was a special treat. His passion for singing will be remembered by many. He deeply loved his family and friends and was always there to lend a hand. All who were lucky to know him will miss him terribly, and he was a relative of one of my deputies. Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Okay, thank you. I ask the council to adjourn in the name of Barry Richard Stubblefield. Barry was one of the finest young men I ever met. In 1973, he was a student at Notre Dame High School, and he lived a couple blocks from my new store, which I just opened in the Valley, a tuxedo shop named Greg's Formal Wear. And he was the first employee I hired there as a high school student. He was a great kid. He used to babysit my kids when they were born. He was really almost like a second son to me. He was killed at the age of 48 in a skiing accident last week. He is survived by his wife, Gilda, who he met at UCLA. He had 4 children, Gentry, Brendan, Natalie, and Pierce. His mother and father, Richard and Colleen, were very good friends of mine, still worked on my campaign, still live in the district. His brothers, Rick and Greg, sisters, Denise, Maggie, and Molly. Barry was one of the nicest young men I ever met. He loved sports, and it's tragic that it was sports that finally killed him in a skiing accident. I ask we adjourn in his memory.
Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I ask that we adjourn today in the memory of Michael Gutierrez, another senseless, tragic death in Los Angeles. This one happened in San Pedro Sunday morning as he was trying to break up a dispute among party guests, one of whom was apparently a gang member. And the gang member pulled a gun and shot Michael in the back of the head, then repeatedly shot his brother, Oscar. Oscar is expected to recover, but Michael was pronounced dead on the grass outside of the house that he rented with his roommates. Michael was a personal trainer at Bally's, and my own personal trainer called me yesterday and reminded me that when we were there early, which I used to do, not anymore, but when we were there early in the morning at Bally's, he was the only other trainer there along with mine, and I certainly remembered him and spoke to him many times. He is survived by his father, Oscar, and his mother, Isabel, as well as his brothers, Oscar, who's 22, and Cruz, who's 25. His father is a dock boss with ILWU Local 94. The family has not made funeral arrangements yet. They are still, of course, tending to Oscar, who is still hospitalized, and but I'll let everyone know when that happens. Harbor Division LAPD is requesting that anyone with information to help them solve the killing of Michael Gutierrez and the wounding of 2 other San Pedrans, if they would please contact Harbor Division LAPD and give them information. It was certainly a life cut short way too soon.
Other tributes? Madam Clerk, please call the roll. Thank you all very much. This meeting is adjourned.